So I just got back from doing a quick test of this Mavic Pro with the very latest firmware that I updated today, and you'll see that if you watch the longer version of my video response to Phuket Word. But it's such a long video, and just while I was out flying I thought I'll just do a very short version for people that don't have the time to sit through sort of a longish video. And this video will just cut to the chase, and the basic point is that using sport mode is absolutely no issue at all when the drone is hovering. There's no gimbal issue when you're just hovering stationary, and that's why Phuket Word's video, you know, I commend him on his effort and I actually gave him a thumbs up for the video for trying, but his point is completely irrelevant to the context of my experiment because I wasn't maneuvering aggressively. Normal mode and sport mode, when you're in a hover, there's just no difference, okay? It's when you start maneuvering and applying control input. In normal mode, the motion of the drone is quite limited. In sport mode, it's more like that. It's much more aggressive, and because of the physical design of the gimbal, when you're maneuvering too aggressively, it can actually reach the physical limits of its movement. Less likely to happen in normal mode. That's why they recommend, if you're just doing it for filming, do it in normal mode. But I'm completely aware of that. You know, I'm completely aware of the limitations of my equipment, and I go into that in a lot more detail in the longer version of the video for anyone that wants to watch it. I'll upload that later. But yeah, flying in normal or sport mode in a hover, there's zero issues with the gimbal. And as you'll see just now, I'll continue with a bit of flying that I was doing where I was switching from normal to sport mode in flight, and you'll see there was no issue. And I'll also include a bit of video footage from the longer video where I was doing testing just here inside the little apartment that I'm staying in, and it shows you again that there was no issue in sport mode. So Phuket Word, you know, I understand what he's doing, and you know, I'm not going to turn this into a nasty tit for tat, not at all. I actually quite like the guy, so it's all good, mate, don't worry. But I have to correct you that even though it was good research, and yes, you found that there's some issues with the Mavic Pro. There's actually issues with all the DJI drones with gimbal tilt to some degree. But the thing is, you've got to apply it in the correct context, and the correct context for that problem is aggressive flying in sport mode. And when you're in a hover, you're not aggressively flying. You're basically just hovering in the one position. There's no severe attitude changes on the drone. So there's no issue for the gimbal. Anyway, watch the flight videos, and if you want more information, there's a lot more of it in the longer version of the video, which I'll put later on. So the drone is now flying, and as you can see, it's just hovering rock steady, okay? It's not moving at all. It's using its visual positioning system just to hold position. Now, what I'm going to do is just show you the image in the video. And what I'm going to do is swap from sport mode to normal mode, backwards and forwards, and you'll see there's no difference in the actual camera position. Okay, we're now in sport mode, normal mode, sport mode, normal mode, sport mode, normal mode. Now what I'll do is I'll zoom in. So I'm zoomed right in now, and we'll go sport mode, normal mode, sport mode, normal mode, sport mode. You'll notice there's no difference in what the camera is doing. None. Normal mode, sport mode, normal mode. So there's my little drone in the sky, and this is what I just love about Australia is you can just walk down a street flying your drone and nobody cares, and you're not actually breaking a rule if you don't go closer than 30 meters to anybody, which I'm not doing. But I was down at the beach, and I'm just walking back to the hotel now, and unfortunately I was foiled by this no-fly zone, which is near Broome Airport. Now I knew it was there, but I didn't know how high it would allow me to go, and it didn't let me go very high at all, so it was pointless to try and repeat that exercise at this location.
You know you're supposed to come and Broome to relax, man, not jog around the fucking whole neighbourhood.
Yeah, so as I said, just walking back to the hotel and flying my drone. Nobody cares. I know there's some countries in the world where you could get into trouble for this, or maybe your neighbours will shoot you out of the sky with a shotgun, but in Australia, everybody loves drones. It's up there. And it looks like my calibration is just excellent. Actually, what I can do is just show you another demonstration. I'll just have to swap hands. Okay, you'll see it's saying no fly zone limit, so it just won't let me go higher, but let me just pause there and switch it. Sport mode. Sport mode. So there's just no change in the gimbal at all when you're hovering. I don't know how many times I have to say it until it sinks in, guys. My experiment was valid because I was hovering. I was not maneuvering aggressively. So there's sport mode. Let's just do it 3 more times for good measure. Sport mode, normal mode, sport mode, normal mode, sport mode, and it's also being displayed up here. Sport, normal, sport, normal, sport, normal, sport, normal. And what I was just thinking, my video is quite long that I made this afternoon, so I might just make a very short version, just demonstrating exactly what I'm showing you here. I did it inside, and I'll add this video as well, and you can see that using sport mode does not change the gimbal at all. When you're hovering, there's not an issue. It only affects the way the aircraft responds, and it allows you to fly more aggressively when it's in sport mode, and that's the problem. When you're flying aggressively, the gimbal can reach the physical limits of its ability to stabilize the camera. But when you're hovering, not an issue. One more time. When you're hovering, it's not an issue. You get the message. So there's the Mavic packed away for travel, and I think we can all agree from my demonstrations that switching from normal to sports mode makes absolutely no difference to the performance of the camera in the hover. So once again, it's only when you're flying aggressively that there is a problem. In a hover, it makes no difference. Now, just going back to Phuket's video, he references this other video on YouTube talking about gimbal issues with December 26 firmware. Now, in the drone world, that firmware is ancient. There have been numerous updates to the firmware on the Mavic since that date. So again, posting that as information of anything is just completely irrelevant. My Mavics came from the factory with newer firmware than that, and they were just bought this year. So if we have a look at the firmware, okay, there's the firmware he's talking about. This is on the DJI Mavic Pro release notes. But if we have a look, we've had firmware that came out in February, and you'll see self-diagnostics. These are all the things that it adds. Optimized video transmission, and if we go to a late, that's actually what my drone had, my first one had out of the factory. And look at this one. This is firmware version 030500. What's new? Optimized gimbal calibration. So it's working a lot better now. And then we've got another one. This came out in April, and that was actually the firmware that I was flying on in my video. What's new? Optimize the return home function, optimized hovering performance. And then there was another one that just came out yesterday, and I've just upgraded my drone to that yesterday and took it for a test fly, and it works fine. And look at all the different new features that it's got. even further optimization of the gimbal and auto calibration. Okay, so it just keeps getting better all the time. Now, the other thing, final point, is referencing the manual. Now, if we look down here, it says video suggestions and tips, and that's all they are. They're not hard and fast rules. They're just suggestions and tips for achieving nice video. If you're trying to get smooth video while you're flying, then yes, absolutely, I agree. I 100% agree, and I'm already aware of that. Only shoot video while flying in P mode, because if you fly too aggressively in sport mode, your gimbal might reach the limit of its range of movement, and your video will look harsh. It'll actually move, and you won't get smooth video. So that's why they make this suggestion and the tip. It's not a hard and fast rule, and anyone who actually understands their equipment will know that if you're just hovering, being in sports mode makes absolutely no difference. And the only reason I did it was because sports mode allows a higher rate of climb. So I got up to 1,000 feet faster. I could repeat this experiment in normal mode and it would achieve exactly the same results. It would just take a little bit longer to get up to 1,000 feet. But I will repeat that experiment just to satisfy people. And I'll even do it with different drones that don't have sport mode. So let's just go back to your video. And once again, I said that I do respect the fact that you did this research, mate, and good on you for finding the flaws. But I think you can see that that information specifically is completely out of date. And the fact that it doesn't apply to the drone when it's hovering really means that your video is completely irrelevant to my video. And so when we look at the title, and don't get offended by this, I'm just having fun with you, but it says Flat Earth Debunker Messes Up Drone Proof. Well, maybe you should change the title to Phuket Word Messes Up the Debunk. But anyway, the problem here is that you get flat earthers who will watch your video and they just swallow it as gospel without realizing how the drone works, without having a clue what sports mode is. And I've already had 4 people on my channel mention, well, you're in sport mode. And I think you've just made a fool of yourself, because you've demonstrated to me that you don't know what sport mode is, and you have no idea that sport mode makes no difference in the hover. So you're creating flat earthers who are just going to embarrass themselves on YouTube. Is that really what you wanted to achieve? It doesn't worry me one iota, but it's entirely up to you. Anyway, you have a nice day, and catch you on YouTube.